Good afternoon. We're just going to clear the waiting room. I think we are.
Hi, Danny. Can you hear me?
Can hear you just well. There's a slight lag between when you're speaking and when we see you speaking.
Hi, Danny. Can you hear me?
Much better. Yes, can hear you and see you.
I was having severe technical difficulties this morning, so I had to get out of this and go on my phone.
We had some difficulties this morning too.
Yes.
A rough technical day. All right, good afternoon. This is a hearing before the licensing board for the city of Boston. Today is Wednesday, September 28th, 2022. Today's hearing is being held pursuant to temporary amendments to the open meeting law. That is what allows us to meet virtually. This hearing is being recorded, will be posted to the city of Boston's website. I will review procedural matters in a moment, but first I will introduce Chairwoman Kathleen Joyce.
Thank you, Danny. Good afternoon. My name is Kathleen Joyce. I am chair of the Boston Licensing Board, and today I am joined by Commissioner Liam Curran and Commissioner Kiana Saxon.
Thank you. For those planning to testify this afternoon, please ensure that your audio and visuals are working properly. There is only one item on this afternoon's agenda. I will read it into the record. I will ask who is present on behalf of the licensee, who is present on behalf of the Boston Police Department, swear in all parties who wish to testify. After that, the licensee or the representative will have an opportunity to make a brief statement, as will the Boston Police, followed by questions by the chair and commissioners. The item on today's agenda is Fuente Cleaning Services, Inc., doing business as the Yaris Columbia, located at 28 Bennington Street in East Boston. Date of the notice was September 26th, 2022. This is an informational hearing regarding the frequency of licensed premise violations and incidents requiring police involvement inside and outside the licensed premise to determine if a closing hour should be reduced or if any other action shall be taken by the board. Who is present on behalf of the licensee?
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Joyce, Attorney Green, and fellow board members. My name is Attorney John Cannell from Upton, Connell, and Devlin. And here also with me outside a screenshot is our newest associate, Tyler Hensler, and who will be assisting me.
Thank you. And will there be anyone present on behalf of the licensee who will be testifying this afternoon?
I see Rigoberto Restrepo. Are you there,
Yes, I'm here.
Great. The manager of record.
Thank you, Mr. Restrepo. And who is present today on behalf of the Boston Police Department who is planning on testifying?
Sergeant Michael Holden. I work in District 7.
Officer Sullivan Venezia, also work at District 7.
Officer Eric Shears, work at District 7 as well.
Sergeant Detective Will Gallagher, if need be.
Thank you.
Sergeant Detective Manny Blas, also working out of District 7.
Detective Enders if needed.
Great. Thank you very much. And was there anybody else who planned on testifying this afternoon? Great. If we could all please stay on mute unless or until we are testifying before the board. Thank you very much. Could all those who plan on testifying please raise your right hand so we can be sworn in? Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Before we move to testimony from the Boston Police, Attorney Cannell would like to ask if you would like to make a brief opening statement or if we shall move to testimony from Boston Police.
Very briefly, this office sent over not too long ago a demonstrative exhibit that we would like to have entered into the record. It's a summation of the police reports that were provided to us yesterday in relating to this informational hearing. That's number one. So if that's accepted, Attorney Green.
We did receive that, and I will share that with the commissioners right now.
All right. Other than that, I waive the opening argument, if you will.
Thank you. And just for the record, Attorney Cannell, your client did agree to waive the 14-day notice required for this hearing. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. Moving to the Boston Police, I believe Sergeant Holden, were you going to testify first?
It looks like I'm going to lead it off. Good afternoon, everyone. Sergeant Holden, I work at District 7. I did prepare a brief statement and kind of a summary of what's been going on down at Billiards. The minimum staffing for District 7 is 8 uniformed officers on the street to answer calls for service. As part of a preventative strategy, uniformed officers can conduct directed patrols, code 19s, in the areas of the district which contain licensed premises. Typically, the focus of these patrols is to provide a visible presence and to monitor the orderly closing of these establishments. Generally, officers are assigned from 01:30 before the bar closes through 3 o'clock after the patrons have left. There are approximately 12 licensed premises on the district which operate during these hours and maintain various liquor and entertainment licenses. There have been 30 year-to-date calls for service to 911 for Billiards, Columbia, not including 311 calls to the mayor's hotline. A vast majority of these calls are for loud music, 21 of 30. I am not aware of any of the other 11 establishments generating any numbers approaching the volume of calls received regarding Billiards, Columbia. The next closest establishment is La Hacienda with 3 calls for service, loud music. From these 30 calls, I have direct knowledge of licensed premise violations being issued for 9 of 30 calls for service. Excessive noise, over occupancy, and live entertainment. A vast majority, 21 of 30, were handled by the uniformed officers on scene without requiring a supervisor. As a result of the volume of complaints generated by Billiards, Columbia, a minimum of 3 officers are assigned to the area to monitor the establishment at closing time. It's usually more, but it depends on what our call volume is. Conservatively, monitoring the area from Thursday through Sunday during closing time requires approximately 40% of my officers during the shift. Year to date, that translates to approximately 650 man hours dedicated to 1/12 of the licensed premises that operate in East Boston. 2 of these calls, and I'll give you the report numbers, 220-45400 and 222-07-3599, required units from downtown, District 1, and state police to respond to East Boston in order to maintain order. This is a list of dates and numbers of reports I am personally aware of year to date regarding Billiards, Columbia that resulted in a licensed premise violation being issued. Do you need me to list them all, or do we all have them?
I believe we all have them. Attorney Cannell, you have them, correct?
Yes, Sergeant need not list them.
Okay. And I also have a breakdown of the 30 calls for service to the yards. I believe everybody's been provided that too, unless you need me to read it into the record.
I'll waive reading it into the record as well.
Okay, that's all I have, and I thank everyone for that time.
Thank you, Sergeant Holden. Chairman Joyce, do you have any questions, or would you like to move on to the next member of Boston Police who would wish to testify?
We can move on. I will reserve my right to ask questions after the next police officer.
Thank you. Who next from the Boston Police wish to testify this afternoon? Is there additional testimony that the Boston Police wish to provide at this time?
Officer Shears? You hear me?
We can hear you just fine. You may go ahead, Officer Shears.
Okay. So about 1:20 a.m. Saturday, 9/24/2022, Officer Shears responded to Officer Shears in the Gold 425 Alpha responded to a radio call to assist Officers Sullivan, Venezia, and Doran in the Gold 101 Alpha for loud music at 28 Bennington Street, East Boston. While Officer Shears was standing in front of 28 Bennington Street, he noticed a large amount of traffic starting to back up on Bennington Street. Officers walked over to the front of Bennington Street parking lot and started directing traffic. Officer heard a loud commotion and observed a suspect later identified as Samuel Montello Bustamante standing in front of a Boston Police cruiser 8537 and appeared to be urinating on the cruiser. Officer walked over to the suspect and noticed that he was pulling up his pants and he was standing in a puddle of fluid dripping from the police cruiser. The officer asked the suspect what was he doing. He replied, sorry. Officer grabbed the suspect and tried to place him under arrest. A crowd of people started to surround the officer while he was trying to maintain control of the suspect. Officer radioed for backup and the suspect pulled away from the officer and attempted to flee. The suspect fled a short distance and fell, and he was placed under arrest without further incident. That's all I'll be adding today.
Thank you, officer. Is there further testimony that the Boston Police wanted to provide at this time?
If you guys have the most recent incident, which resulted in a couple of arrests, Officer Sullivan Venezia can read that into the record if you need him to.
Chairman Joyce, did you want the reports read into the record today? I believe this is more about the totality of the response to the licensed premise.
I would object to the police reports for the event of this past weekend. There's been no hearing scheduled for that particular event. In my belief, is not really before the board today.
That's fine. Are there any other witnesses that wish to testify to the totality of the number of incidents that have been have taken place at this location?
Detective Gallagher, I could just add a little if possible. Myself and Detective Hernandez have been monitoring this premise for several years now. I do want to add that the place used to be a pool hall with a capacity of 49. There were incidents there, but they weren't as numerous as they are now. The place has removed the pool tables and has turned into kind of a full nightclub. I've noticed the increase in calls and the volume has picked up a lot with the change of format. I've been told that the Special Services Department has not yet granted permission for that, but that might be old news. But since the changeover from the pool hall to the nightclub, the incidents have picked up a lot. The live music complaints have resulted in numerous 911 calls and 311 calls to City Hall for loud music. And I'm aware that District 7 is spending a great amount of man hours down there monitoring this premise at closing time. That's all I really have to add at this time.
Thank you, Sergeant Gallagher. Any further testimony at this time for Boston Police before we move to the licensee? Okay. Attorney Cannell, if you would like to respond.
Yes, thank you, Attorney Green. I believe it's important to discern what's really before the board today, and that's the police reports that were provided to us yesterday relating to, quote, the total number of police encounters at this licensee. This isn't a fact-specific inquiry to any particular event. That's not within the notice, and it's not before the board. So what you have are a total number of police encounters with this licensee. And as with any general, broad, vague, ambiguous charge like this, it can be subject to mischaracterization. So what we have to do is look at the police reports that were provided to us yesterday and discern really statistically and data-wise what is before this board. We have provided to the board a summary of all the police reports this office has digested over the last 24 hours and has summarized and has assimilated into a single piece of paper. So if the board wants to follow along, we have the incident numbers all the way on the left-hand side, the first column down. And if you look at what has been provided by the police department, we have since June, 3 months approximately, 9 police encounters, one of which alleged no violations observed. Of the 9, 1 occurred this past weekend, and we haven't had a hearing on that yet.
Attorney Cannell, which one is no violation occurred?
That is number 6.
Okay.
Chairwoman Joyce, if you look,
yeah,
we can go to the individual reports. They're kind of dense, but I've been over this. I think it's accurate, and I'll make reference. I'm sorry, I meant to make reference to the event number.
Okay.
So we have 9 events. Event number 6, nothing was observed to be out of the ordinary. Event number 9, which occurred this past weekend, has not yet been provided to the board. There's been no evidence of it. It would be a pre-adjudication of that hearing to make a finding today based on what's in that police report. I myself have looked at the videotape of what happened this past weekend, and I dare say it's a gross exaggeration what's in the police report from what I saw on the video. What I saw on the video at 1 a.m. and just after 1 a.m. is a very sedate place where a transgender who came from Colombia pursuant to a one-day entertainment license sang and presented on a stage until the appointed hour, which was midnight. And after that, she mingled with the crowd and at one point picked up the microphone to say goodbye to everybody. It was at that point that the police entered, completely standing out as people walking around when there was nothing else really going on in the place. And I would just ask the board to disregard the police reports from this past weekend as premature to base any quasi-judicial finding upon. So back to the 9 events. A third event, one, was for overcrowding. That would be event number 2. The overcrowding event was by 3 people. 52 people were found in a establishment that was capacity 49. One of these events of the 9 was for allegedly not cooperating with the police in providing videotape, but the videotape was provided. It was provided when the police and the right person at the licensee communicated. I've seen the text. And it was for an event that didn't occur at this licensed premise. It occurred off the premise in a parking lot, and the police were investigating, and they wanted to see who, if anybody, was in the premise on this particular night. It took a day or 2, according to the police, to get the right person, but when they talked to the right person, the videotape was provided immediately. One of the 9 events has been fully adjudicated. That would be event number 1, exceeding occupancy capacity, has been fully adjudicated and resulted in a 1-day suspension last week. So it's already been before the board. So of all 9 police encounters, we have 3 left. And all 3 were for not having a proper entertainment license for a disc jockey. That's the universe of the evidence that the Boston police have presented. So while this totality, I don't know why I'm having a problem with this word, while the totality of all the alleged misconduct at this place, when you boil it down and read these police reports, you have 3 events that were for not having a license for a disc jockey. The licensee is dismantled. Whatever disc jockey equipment has been in there, they're fully aware of that. I'm informed that they provided the equipment to the board. They intend to have no live entertainment going forward until they apply for, and if granted an annual license, they have no intention of applying for an annual license for the next 6 months. And that's the universe of evidence before the board. With regard to the DJ events alleged, that's not a liquor license issue. It may impact the entertainment license or the failure to obtain a live entertainment license in the future, but it's not a basis for a rollback of this licensee's all alcoholic beverage license. This is an establishment that is a favorite of Boston's Colombian community, and there aren't many. And admittedly, the Colombian community enjoys a good time. They like lively music. And to the degree that they're being selected by the Boston police and now by the board to essentially shut them down by rolling back their hours, that would be for the excesses with these 3 or 4 disc jockey events. Back to the totality of all the calls. Of the 9 police encounters, only 4 were initiated by neighbors or other people. The remaining 5 were initiated by police compliance checks. So of all the complaints alleged about this establishment, only 4 were initiated by the community. Of the 9 encounters, 6 of these encounters all occurred before 12:30 a.m. This is not a closing hour issue. This isn't a basis to roll back the hours when 2/3 of the alleged violations or the alleged encounters, some of which didn't even result in violations, occurred before 12:30 a.m. Only 2 occurred after 1 a.m. Of the total 9 encounters, 1 did not result in a hearing, 6 have had their hearings, and 2 have not had their hearings. So with regard to the matters already adjudicated, 6 are not even before this board today. 1 never arose, and 2 are awaiting a hearing. There is essentially nothing before this board today that hasn't been already adjudicated or is waiting adjudication. That is not a basis to impose discipline, which a rollback would be. For this licensee, if this board takes judicial notice of its own docket sheet, which was also kindly provided to us, this licensee has a 10-year history. In 10 years, a good decade, there's only been 2 one-day suspensions, one of which was last week. There are licensees across Boston that have a far worse track record, far worse disciplinary hearing, a far worse record of non-compliance, who have never and will never be subject to a rollback hearing like this based on the shotgun approach of we receive a lot of calls. If they receive a lot of calls, they should be adjudicated, investigated, and determined with a resolution from this board. The mere fact that we received today a call log relating to this address is not evidence of anything. We don't know what the call log reflects or why they were called. It could have been somebody that the establishment itself called if they had a problem. It could be anything. This licensee should be judged against all Boston licensees. The presentation by the police department was an indictment against them based on other East Boston establishments within this police jurisdiction, not all of East Boston. When you judge this licensee against all licensees within the city of Boston, what you have is a place that on the last 3 months, over 4 occasions, there was excess noise alleged, and they have all been dealt with. We don't think what has been presented by the Boston police is basis for doing anything today. We understand the police frustration and the determination for them to make a difference, but a rollback for this type of place would be a closure, a revocation, in essence, of this licensee's liquor license. And we don't think that's fair to this licensee or the Columbian community. Other than that, I don't have any further questions of the Boston police officers, and we have the manager of record here if he wants to answer any questions. I know there's been an ongoing dialogue with regard to the soundproofing. I understand that there's a process underway that has not yet been completed. That's approximately a $25,000 project to soundproof. There are issues whether they can soundproof the upper panes of glass, where perhaps the police don't want that. But that's an ongoing process, but they're determined to do that, and they're determined to remain a vibrant spot for the Columbian community to come and celebrate their heritage. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Cannell. Move to Chairman Joyce if you have any questions for the licensee or the Boston Police.
Thanks, Attorney Cannell. I do, Sergeant Holden,
Yeah.
I have some questions for you.
Okay.
Can you describe in your own words your firsthand knowledge of police activity that has been dispatched to this location over the last, let's say, 3 months?
So I am typically the patrol supervisor, about 2/3 of the time, and then maybe the other third of the time I'm inside doing the administrative stuff. So when we get a call for loud music or any other type of call, there's initially a rapid car response, and then they determine if there's grounds for writing a code 35 They generally notify me and I will go down there, check the licenses, check the noise, check the occupancy, and check for any other violations. I would say in the last 3 months, I've probably been down there 4 times. Like I said, I'm only out on the street 2/3 of the time. I've written 2 violations. But like I said, a majority of the calls that we get don't generate police reports necessarily. And the majority of them are handled by the officers on scene without requiring a supervisor.
Okay. And you testified that there are 12, in total, 12 licensed premises in this district?
I'm just going by my own memory. I was trying to count them up, but I would say there are about 12.
Okay. And you testified that you're not aware of any other of the 11 establishments generating this number of call volume?
The closest one that I was able to find was the Hacienda. I did a search year to date for all of them, and the closest one is La Hacienda. They had 3 legitimate noise complaints.
Okay, and how many police officers do you assign to Belarius at closing time?
3. We put a rapid down there, which is a 2-man car, and then 1 more service car.
Is that customary for other licensed premises in your district?
We generally assign them based on need. If I could have them assigned to a different licensed premise, I absolutely would. But like I said, a majority of them don't generate the volume of calls that we have here.
Okay, and you would characterize the volume of calls attributed to Belarius as normal, above average, average?
It's definitely above average. I mean, if you use my numbers year to date, which I'm sure is a matter of dispute, I have 30 calls, and that's a conservative number for me. If it was kind of a toss-up, I gave it to the licensee. So I'm only really counting 30 calls, which would be 10 times more than La Hacienda.
And La Hacienda is next door, is that right?
La Hacienda is actually on Meridian Street.
Okay. Okay. At this point, I will reserve my right to ask Sergeant Holden other questions, but I want to ask Commissioner Curran or Commissioner Saxon, do you have any questions of Sergeant Holden at this point?
I do. We were dealing with this place back in 2018. Were you in the district then, Sergeant Holden?
I was a patrolman at that time when Captain McCormick was in charge, and they had previously had a rollback for, I think, 3 of the establishments.
Okay. My question would be to you, if you could answer it, is, do you have any experience from that time versus now regarding how this establishment has been dispersing around the closing hour? Like, do you have personal knowledge of how it was going then versus how is it regressed to now, if it's regressed at all?
I mean, primarily, I would characterize it ever since they changed the format from just being a pool hall to moving towards more of a nightclub. And it's a much different crowd. You have many more instances of the loud music and the overcrowding. And, one of the nights there were 217 people in there. So they were, it far exceeded their occupancy. To characterize it as normally maybe 3 or 4 over is maybe only right about half of the time. And so, in my opinion, since they changed the format, the volume has increased exponentially.
And when was that format changed? Do you know?
I want to say, I don't know if they ever officially did it, but it's about the last 5 months.
I believe we have it in the docket sheet on the entertainment side when they removed the pool tables.
About the removal of the pool tables, Chairwoman?
Yes, that's my recollection. I don't have it in front of me.
Okay. Those would be my questions for the sergeant.
Could the sergeant elaborate just a little bit about the soundproofing? I thought I heard in one of the reports that you might have an issue with the soundproofing being on the top. Could you just clarify that, please?
Are you asking me, ma'am?
Yeah, I thought I heard in one of the reports that there's some issue with the soundproofing. Could you just elaborate on?
Generally, that's not my area of expertise. That would go to Sergeant Detective Gallagher. What we have suggested numerous times to them is that they invest in soundproofing for the building, which was not originally designed to be a nightclub. I believe at some point in the past, it was either a cleaning service or a dry cleaners. I mean, I've only been in East Boston since 2000. I don't recall exactly what it was there before. The building is not really designed for that, but in order to alleviate the sound issues, we had suggested they do soundproofing. There's been some disagreement with the licensee as to whether they are able to get soundproof windows that are not artificially darkened, which would be a violation. I believe the board has suggested to them that that is that they are able to get that.
No. The board did not suggest they could get tinted windows. The board suggested that they investigate and explore options for non-tinted windows that provide sound barriers. And Nene came in twice last week and asked if he could cover the tops of the windows. They're sort of two-paned windows, Commissioner Saxon, and they have to, by their security agreement, they have to keep them open during hours of operation, and they want to soundproof the top pane of the window, which I said after we get through last weekend, we would sit down with the district captain and discuss options. But I also urged him to explore options for non-tinted soundproofing windows, because it's my belief that there are other places in the city that have non-tinted soundproofing windows. He said he hasn't found any yet, but I urged him to go back and do some more research.
Yes, ma'am, I concur. I wasn't suggesting that you told him he had to.
Oh, no, yeah. I just want to make it clear for the record, we were working with them, but he asked me to facilitate a discussion with the district captain on whether or not he could have tinted windows. And I said we would discuss it after, if we could get through this weekend, which was last weekend. And here we are today.
Okay.
Does that answer your question, ma'am?
Yeah. There's some clarification there. Thank you.
I just want to recognize, I saw a raised hand from Sergeant Detective Blas. I don't know if there was something specific you wanted to add.
Good afternoon, everyone. I just wanted to know, after this, the incident that occurred on the 20th with the pretty egregious overcrowding violation, I returned about a week later. And that was based on a large crowd that had gathered on Bennington, essentially shutting down Bennington Street. Apparently there had been some soccer game that drew a large crowd of revelers to Bennington Street, rendering it shut down. We had to just stop all traffic in all directions. The crowd gathered in the area near the municipal lot there. I saw that all the licensed premises in that immediate area were affected by this. I made my rounds and I asked each, for example, La Terraza, Bohemios, Villares, Colombia. I said, please keep the front of your sidewalks clear as we try to deal with this crowd. What I noted while I was out there was that these other establishments were able to do this. Villares was not able to clear the sidewalk. I spoke to the security detail that was out there, and they expressed that they were having a difficult time dealing with this crowd. And ultimately, I did enter there, and they were found to be 52 over capacity. I just wanted to note as well that on the 14th, when I wrote up that violation, there was essentially no one in charge inside of the business. So this is on the 14th, after having these pretty egregious incidents with respect to overcrowding, and security basically admitting that they can't handle the crowds that they're dealing with. I walk into this business and I find that no one is in charge. I would note that when we were asking for video on that day, it was with respect to a firearm related incident. The detectives from my office, we cannot prove that there was someone armed inside of this business, but I can say that the individuals that are involved in a firearm investigation were patrons at some period in time that night before they had a very negative interaction with the police. Again, if there was a firearm in that business that night on July 9th, that again would speak to security and them essentially not being able to handle the crowds that are ending up at this business. That's all I have to say for now.
Thank you, Sergeant Detective Blas. Yeah, Chairman Joyce, do you have your hand raised?
Yeah, just following up on the prior testimony, Sergeant Blas, I just wanted to, he mentions there was no manager on duty when he at one or two multiple incidents, but Attorney Cannell, you have the manager of record with us today?
I do, and he stands ready to answer any questions, but I would ask this board to strike the testimony of Sergeant Manny Blas on his speculation that on this event that's already been adjudicated that there was a firearm. There's no police record of that. It's Sergeant Blas's speculation. We provided the videotape. The videotape resulted in nothing. That's not before the board.
Okay.
If the police wanted to speculate all day long, they could, but that's not evidence before the board. And I will say too, with regard, I had a few questions for Sergeant Holden, but with regard to Sergeant Blas, the event that's already been adjudicated when the Colombian national soccer team, I think it was, won a big, as they call it, football match, the whole neighborhood was overwhelmed. They had nothing to do emanating from this licensee. It took everybody surprised. It's just as if, you know, in the other neighborhoods of Boston, if the Red Sox had won the World Series or the Patriots had won the Super Bowl, and you have spontaneous people spilling into the streets and crowding and acting in a belligerent manner and blocking traffic, that's what you had here. This wasn't the licensee's fault. So those are the two incidents I'd like to address with Sergeant Manny Blas. Before you get to
Attorney Cannell, it's my recollection that your client was testified that he was not surprised by this soccer game, by this football game. And we found
he's a Colombian. He's a Colombian. Of course, he's not surprised by his national team winning.
Yeah, so it wasn't a surprise. I think the whole board found that there was no surprise, that it was a foreseeable event.
With all due respect, Mr. Kern, I mean, if the Patriots won the Super Bowl, or probably more appropriate, if the Red Sox won the World Series, it would not be a surprise that people would flood the streets. If that's what you mean.
That's exactly what I mean. Yeah, I think you characterized it the opposite, that the neighborhood had been surprised by this event.
No, what I said was it wasn't the licensee's fault.
But you also said that they were surprised.
It didn't emanate from some failure to manage the licensed premise.
Yeah, but we found that they had failed to act appropriately with this foreseeable event.
I understand that, but I take issue with that. But I'm just trying to make these points.
We already found that are
right, and as I've said, this has already been adjudicated. So. Ms. Joyce, I don't know if you want me to ask a few questions. I have Sergeant Holden before you move on to the licensee.
Please forgive me. You're up.
Sure. Sergeant Holden.
Sir.
You testified that 3 police officers are assigned to the 2 a.m. to 3 a.m. I think it is, or 1:30 to 3 a.m. closing time around this licensee.
Correct.
But the police also, in that assignment, they also monitor the 2 places across the street. Is that correct?
That is an added side benefit, correct.
Right. And then there's I forget the name of it. It might be an Irish place, but there's another licensed establishment that has a similar closing hour in the vicinity of this licensee.
Kelly's?
I think so.
I think that's what you're talking about, but it does have a bar. It's primarily a restaurant, but it is about 3 blocks from there.
And would it be fair to say that none of the police reports that have been provided to the licensee for this informational hearing have any reference whatsoever to disbursement issues at 2 a.m. or after, or even before?
I can only speak to the ones that I'm familiar with. So I think we've already talked about a previous incident where there was an issue with disbursement. Generally speaking, we don't have a huge issue with disbursement down there. But there have been 2 calls this year where the volume and the disbursement was such an issue that we had to call outside the district and bring in the state police.
Right. Well, if those 2 do exist, they weren't part of the police reports that were provided to us. Is all I'll say. With that, Chairwoman Joyce, I think those are the few questions that I had for Sergeant Holden.
Okay. I want to move on to my questions for the manager of record.
Who I see is muted.
Yes, sir, you're muted.
You ask him to unmute. He is listed here as Belarus, Columbia. Here we go.
Yes,
Hi, sir. So you're the manager of record for this licensed premise?
yes,
Are you a citizen?
yes,
Are you a resident of Massachusetts?
yes.
Where do you live?
33 Maggie Road in Revere.
Okay, and what is your experience in the food and beverage industry?
1995.
Okay, you've
Yeah.
been working in this, you've been working here since 1995?
Yes,
And are you familiar with the rules and regulations of this board?
yes, I am.
Are you familiar with the rules and regulations of the ABCC?
Yes, I am.
And are you familiar with the rules and regulations as they pertain, the laws of the Commonwealth as they pertain to the sale and service of alcohol?
Yes, I am.
Okay, how many hours a week do you work at this licensed premise?
50 hours.
You're there 50 hours a week
Yes,
on site?
yes,
Were you there on June 20th when there was a violation for being over occupancy?
no.
Were
My
you
manager.
there? What's that?
My manager,
And which manager was there that night?
Mary Quintana.
Okay. And on June 27th, were you there when a crowd was gathering outside? I'm going off of your attorney's list. Crowd was gathering outside and you were over capacity by a few people. This was at 12:02 a.m. Were you there that night?
Yes,
You were, okay.
yes,
Were you there on July 14th when you written up for failure to cooperate with the police?
no,
You weren't. Okay. That was at 9:30 p.m. You weren't there.
no,
Okay, July 27th, were you there when you were written up for a disc jockey playing without an entertainment license?
this is my birthday.
Excuse me?
No, this is my birthday.
That was your birthday, okay.
Yeah.
Were you there on July 30th?
No,
Were you there on August 9th?
no,
Do you know what happened on August 9th?
yes,
Okay.
yes,
What about August 20th? Were you there when you were written up at 12:13 a.m. for a premise providing a DJ without a license?
no,
No. Were you there on September 21st when police responded to a complaint for excessive noise?
no. It's the lady.
Okay. Were you there last weekend?
Yes.
What hours were you working last weekend?
I go to 10:30, 11.
Okay. And as manager of record, what was your understanding of the one-time license that you had to operate on Friday night?
12 a.m.
What was that?
At 12, at 12 a.m.
You had to
PM.
end at 12 p.m.? Okay.
Yeah.
So can you describe for the board what happened at 12 p.m.? You know,
That's the police coming, the many people. Too much police coming here.
okay. And what is your relationship with Fernie?
That's my son.
Your son, okay. Did he describe for you what my conversations were with him several times last week?
Yes,
What did he say?
he's very nice, everything. You're very nice, everything.
Did he tell you I called him at 8 o'clock in the morning, woke him up?
Yes,
Why did I call him?
he told me about the complaint.
Yeah, I got a complaint after I'd given him a license for a different night. He decided to operate without a license that night. Did he tell you about that? I called him at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Yes,
Okay. Did he tell you about when he stopped in my office a couple times last week?
yes.
What did I say to him?
No more complaint. And
What else did I say to him?
I don't know.
Okay, so you're the manager of record. Your name is on this license.
Yes,
You're risking your reputation as a manager of record and you're risking your alcohol license. And I'm dealing with your son, trying to give him a chance to operate.
he suspended one day.
Oh, that was for
1
something
month.
else. That was for something else. We were discussing the security and operations plan. We're discussing soundproofing. We're discussing the windows being tinted. We were discussing the $8,000 he spent for this DJ on Friday night. And he begged and begged and begged me to allow him to have this. And what did he say to me in response? I'll tell you, he said he would not have over 49
And
people. He would have proper staff and he would turn the music off at midnight. And there'd be no problems. So much to my surprise, I received a call on Saturday morning from the police captain to say that none of those things happened. Are you aware of that?
he went suspended for 1 month.
No.
I want,
I know he would rather his license being suspended. We're not discussing that today. He's already had his license suspended for 1 day. We're discussing my conversations with him last week when he came into my office twice.
No.
And as chair of the board, I took time out of my schedule to sit down and actually helped him fill out the application for annual entertainment license.
I'm sorry, he tried to tell you that he's going to
What's your
suspend
name?
for Mary
What's your name?
Quintana. Mary Quintana, I'm sorry to
And who are you?
introduce me. Mary Quintana, I'm the manager.
You're the manager or Nene's the manager or this person's the manager?
Both.
Both.
Both. I'm here when Fernie is not here. And
And why isn't Fernie with us today? Why isn't Fernie with us today?
He's here.
Chairwoman Joyce, if I may. He may be here. I don't know if he's here or not, but I told him to ask he was criminally charged over the event of this past weekend. And as I tell any restaurant licensee, you can't testify at the civil hearings. It may jeopardize his criminal case. But I said the actual determination should be made by your criminal defense lawyer. Of course, I would like to have his testimony available. And he received advice from his criminal defense lawyer that he shouldn't speak. He may jeopardize his criminal case.
Sure.
So that's the reason why I didn't offer him as a
Okay, I'm trying to get to the person who's responsible for the day-to-day operations of this place, because we're talking about a very serious thing that could happen here. And he's claiming he was here for 50 hours a week. And I'm trying to get at what his awareness is of some of the conversations I've had with Nene. I've spent a lot of time with him in the last week. All right, I'm not sure who that woman was, but she's another manager.
Yeah, she works at the restaurant. When Rigoberto is not there, she fills in. You know, every manager of record can't be there for the entirety of when
Sure.
the restaurant is open, and they have what you would call either assistant manager, it's a general manager. She's not the manager of record, but she does. She's bilingual as well. So I think what she's really trying to do is translate.
Yeah, that was clear. I just want to get back to how this license premise works with the board, how this license premise works with the police, and what their history is of cooperating with us, okay? So, sir, when you train your staff before a big event like you had Friday night, or a couple of the other events you had leading up to Friday night, what do you tell your staff as far as cooperation with the police, should the police arrive on scene?
Cooperate.
Cooperate.
Okay. And what does that mean? When the police come in and tell you to turn the music down, do you turn the music down for the night?
I do. I turn off the music and I go outside and talk to the police. He said that I had to take the everybody out.
Okay. I'm going to turn to, I think, Sergeant Holden or one of the officers. I don't see him on here. Officer Sullivan Venezia, or open it up to an officer that has responded here. How would you describe the cooperation by the licensee at this license premise when you've had to respond to calls? I'm going to first turn it to Officer Sullivan Venezia and then ask Sergeant Holden to describe in his own words the cooperation that he's received when he's showed up.
Yes, ma'am. For the most part, they have cooperated. I wouldn't say they're uncooperative. But on that given night, Friday night, the 29th, sorry, they were very uncooperative. They were trying to prevent us from entering the establishment. And my partner that night, Officer Doran, he was trying to further investigate the hired singer that they mentioned in Columbia. And Fernie, the manager in charge, further tried to prevent my officer that night from identifying that singer. So that given night, they were very uncooperative.
And why was he trying not to identify the singer, was, in your opinion?
Why was my partner trying to identify the singer?
Or why was Fernie not helping your partner identify who the singer was that night? Are they still singing, or?
I can't answer for Fernie, but I'm not sure what was his motives that night.
Yeah, but Fernie was behind. I'm sorry. Fernie was behind, and when you guys put the hands in the truck, the lady or the guy, the white singer, he tried to prevent you guys heard her or him, because he's a translator, and Fernie doesn't do anything. He just say like, wait, like don't hurt her, right? That's the only thing that he do.
Okay, I'm going to jump in because we're not having a hearing on that specific incident. We'll schedule that for a later date. I just want to talk about in general the level of cooperation between the licensee and the police officers that are responding to this place. And so, Officer Sullivan Venezia, do you have anything more you'd like to add?
Yeah, like I said, in general, they are very cooperative.
Okay, Sergeant Holden, when you've had to respond in person?
Yeah, Mary's always been very cooperative. There's always some issues trying to actually get the noise down to an acceptable level, but she does try. Like I said, the layout of the building and the change in usage kind of makes it hard to get them under the 50 decibels. But she does try. She's never I've never had an issue with her.
70.
It's 50 after 11.
Oh, 50 after 11? Oh, I didn't know. You told me
It's
70.
No, I told you 70
And
at any time.
And I looked in my phone.
Yeah, 70 at any time is a violation, and 50 after
But
11.
I have it here in my license, so I have it here. Hold on. I have it here. 70.
Well,
Okay.
the board can correct me, but I believe it's anything over 50 after 11 and anything over 70 at any time.
I don't
The
have the
citywide
license.
noise ordinance, that's correct.
I don't have the.
Yeah.
What was it, Danny?
Sergeant Holden was correct. It is 50 decibels after 11 PM.
We
Okay.
have I have a paper here, they say 70, but it's okay, I'm gonna change it, 50 after 11.
Okay.
Because
And with
I'm gonna-
regards,
We can talk about that, we can help you understand the license after this hearing if there's particular questions about times and decibels. Okay, I'm going to ask Commissioner Curran first. Should you have any questions for the manager of record or whoever is with him?
My question for him, or just the licensee in generally, so the Attorney Cannell, are you guys dutifully following the provisions set out in the 2018 agreement? Are you aware of them still? Has management been trained on them, or is continuing to follow this?
Board member Curran, I can answer that. We've been through, I actually drafted that. I drafted that agreement, even though it's between the licensing board and 3 separate licensees. I believe I drafted it and I'm very familiar with it. I went over it yesterday with the client in my conference room. We went item by item and I asked, are you complying with this? And every single one of them was they're in compliance. That's the contract, if you will, that this licensee has with the city. In particular, the one that I wanted to make most sure of course, cooperation with the police is in there. It doesn't need to be in there because that's a rule, but they understand that. But the one in particular was that they have a third-party security company at closing hour, which I confirmed. They have one person, I think, up till 1 a.m. And then they have 2 people from 1 a.m. to 1 a.m. to 2 a.m. So we went through every item and some of those were removing, I think, the curtains. And as far as my examination, it looked like they were in complete compliance with their enhanced obligations with the city.
Okay, including no admittance after 1, last call at 1:30, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, you only have that extra security until 2, not later, because you have everyone out by 2:30. Wouldn't you keep everybody out by 2? A little bit later?
By 2, everybody by 2.
So you're doing that, you're getting everybody out by 2 voluntarily?
Yes.
Okay, and what about, do you have a list of problematic patrons? Has that arisen?
We do.
And you maintain?
I don't have
that?
no problem. No problem with that.
Mr. Kern, I think that might be a translation issue. I went over it. They do not have a list, but they would have nobody on the list. They don't have problematic people. So I don't know.
They haven't identified any patrons that they've had an incident with that they don't want to.
No.
That's correct.
Okay. And they haven't received any names from the other establishments?
I'm sorry, what do you say?
Attorney Cannell, if you can answer.
I didn't hear. I'm sorry. Can you say it again?
So they have not put anyone on a list and they haven't received any names from the other establishments?
That's correct. That's what I understand from my meeting yesterday.
Okay. That's all I would have right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Saxon, do you have any questions for the manager of record for the licensee?
I'll reserve right now. Thank you. No questions at this time.
Thank you. Chairwoman Joyce, anything further at this time? Oh, you're on mute.
I don't have any questions at this time.
Thank you. I will ask Attorney Cannell if he has any closing questions or statements for the board at this time.
Just very briefly, I don't want to waste everybody's time by re-arguing all the points that I made, but I would just like to highlight Officer Sullivan, Venezia, and Sergeant Holden's testimony that this licensee is always, quote, very cooperative. I understand there was an incident last weekend that'll be the subject of a future hearing, but I do believe the touchstone of any licensee is their cooperation with the board and the police. And I would ask the board to consider and weigh that testimony very heavily, that they are very cooperative people.
Thank you. Anything further from for the board from Sergeant Holden? Thank you. All right. If there are no further questions from the board, that will adjourn today's informational hearing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.